and welcome back to Zia Cooking. I am so glad you guys are here today. I am your home cooking chef, Kerry, and we are about to jump into a wonderful, wonderful meal. What else happens in Kerry's kitchen but delicious food? Today we are going to be creating one of the most comfort foods that I love to have, and I'm one of those ladies that likes to talk a lot, so follow along, and if you haven't subscribed, you want to make sure you join our family by clicking subscribe right now. Today we're going to be creating Caldo de Albondigas. What? Albondigas, meatballs. That's right. We're going to be creating a delicious Mexican, New Mexico inspired meatball soup. Now you find meatballs in every culture around the world. We find them in all sorts of different recipes, and so today I'm going to be showing you how easy it is to create this in your own home. So let's not waste any time and let's get going. Remember, you always want to start with clean hands in your kitchen and have all of your supplies in place, so let's get moving. Today we're going to be doing a couple of things. We're going to be creating a delicious broth with all of these homemade vegetables. And then we're also going to be creating our meatballs. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm using our Dutch oven today, and I went ahead and I added in about a half of a tablespoon, just a very small amount of oil to the bottom of our pan. Sorry for banging that so loud to my production team and set manager. I'm sure that blew up our microphones there. So to this, we're going to go ahead and heat it up and get that warmed up here in our Dutch oven. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about all the wonderful ingredients that we're going to be using today. We're going to be incorporating tomato, onion, garlic. We're going to be using a couple of carrots. We're going to use a good old potato because potatoes are always wonderful in soups and stews. And you're also going to find a celery stalk. We have a lot of spices, and I'll talk about those as we drop them in. When we hear the word caldo, we hear sopas, we hear stews, soups, broths. What the heck is going on? When I refer to a caldo, I'm usually referring to something that has a broth base. And when I'm talking about a sopa or sopita, I'm talking about something that has a thicker base and is incorporating macaroni. So let's get started on our caldo today. To make our simple base to get going, I went ahead and I chopped up 2 of these delicious on the vine tomatoes. I added some onion and some garlic, and that is going to go into our blend. Red onion or white onion? We're doing white onion today, and I'll tell you what, we always are looking at amounts, and let's talk a little bit about soup. You know, when you're creating soups, it's really hard to use exact measurements because you might find different things coming out of your refrigerator, and every time you create, you're going to be doing something a little bit different. But today, I'm going to be using 2 full tomatoes. I'm going to use about 1/3 of a good white onion, and I put in 2 cloves of garlic. And I'm hoping that I took the time to plug this in on the other side. Wonderful. Easy, easy peasy. So all I did is just ran that through my blender, and I want to show you how delicious that looks. Oh my gosh. You see that? All those vegetables? That onion and garlic. So now it's hitting my hot skillet. Going to start the cooking process there. We'll move that out of the way. Now to this, what I like to do is let it cook for just a moment or two, and I'm going to toss it around and just get a little bit of cook on that. Now, because I incorporated the onion and the garlic, this way it's blended into a creamy base. But I know my granny used to always like to just put the onion and the garlic in and saute that for a bit before she added in the others. So this is a twist of Granny's old-fashioned recipe with a Kerry flair. So let's just keep on moving around. So to this, because I always come home and I've got a hungry crowd waiting to eat, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start our vegetables that take a little bit more time in cooking. So to this, I am adding in some bite-sized pieces of carrots and celery. I'm going to go ahead and dump that in now. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add in 1 large potato. And what I did with the potato is I went ahead and I peeled it and I chopped it, and that's going to go right into our vegetable mixture. This is already smelling delicious. I can't believe how lovely this looks too. All of these delicious colors. Now, for those of you cooks, we always remember that we've got to get those root vegetables cooking quicker. So let's go ahead and we're going to let those simmer. And what other ingredient I'm going to be adding to this is some broth, because we're going to thin this out to make a delicious caldo for our meatballs. So I'm going to go ahead and pour in about maybe a little bit more than 1 cup of this delicious beef stock that we have reserved right here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to cover this. Remember, when you're cooking and you put a cover on, you're allowing the cook to come from the top and the bottom, and that again will shorten some of your cooking time. Now let's move over to this lovely mess, and I'm talking about this delicious ground beef. I am using a super lean ground beef today, and it is a 93% lean. And the reason that I choose to use a lower fat when I'm making my soups and stews is because I'm incorporating all of this here, and I really don't want a lot of oil into my soup. Now, one thing I do recommend is when you're making hamburgers or something that you're going to use something with more fat content. But for soups and stews, I recommend this to be the way to go. Now, when you're making traditional meatballs for albondigas, I always get tongue-tied when I'm saying that word. What we do is one of the main components that we're going to add into our ground beef is some rice. And so what I did is I took a 1/4 cup, we're starting with 1 pound of ground beef. I took a 1/4 cup of white rice and I boiled it on my stovetop for 5 minutes. What that does is it allows it to pre-cook, and I go ahead and I'm just gonna dump that right in to my ground beef. Now this works as a binder, so it helps your meatballs stay stuck together. It also helps, like my granny raising 9 kids, expand your budget. So she would use 2 pounds of ground beef, and then she would add in sometimes up to a cup of rice. Now what I like to do when I'm working with my meatballs is I like to use my plane, and I've talked about that before, but I go ahead and I just run it in with some of that delicious white onion that we talked about. I like this. It's easier than dicing or cutting. It allows the natural juices of the onion also to start to flavor your meat. And you can already smell that. Love, love, love that smell. And I'm going to do the same exact thing on the lower part of the plane, and I'm going to use that with the garlic. Now this makes a delicious meatball. I'm going to infuse all that flavor in there. Take those large chunks out. I like to have small bite-sized flavorful pieces of onion, but if you like to have bigger pieces or you like that crunch, feel free to go ahead and add that diced rather than minced or blended like I did today. Now traditionally a lot of people like to pop in an egg to bind and to stick it together, but I skip that part and I use just a little bit of cheese because you know I am that queso girl. There's no way that I'm going to go without it. We're going to add that in there, and today for our spices we're using Mexican oregano, we are using salt, garlic salt, and we're using some fresh ground pepper, so we'll go ahead and put that in there. Now, because of today's show, I wanted to show you, because this sometimes can take a little bit of time, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to start to blend this up, as you see, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to dig in my hands. I'm going to mix it well. When you're making your meatballs, you want to make sure that you are not going to overwork your meat, because it'll make a really tough meatball, and that's the last thing that we want going down in our soup today. So once this is incorporated, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull on my gloves, and I am going to form some small meatballs. Now the size of the meatballs is dependent on a couple of things. First and foremost, what is your family's preference? I like bite size, but some people like to make a bigger meatball, and that's okay. And some people like smaller meatballs, so go with what you'd like to do. So let's go ahead and, because I did prepare some meatballs before y'all joined me in the kitchen, I'm going to roll these up after you leave and make these meatballs, and I'm going to freeze them on a parchment lined cookie sheet. Once they're frozen solid, I'm going to put them in a Ziploc bag, and the next time I go to create a delicious albondigas soup, my meatballs are already made. Don't be afraid if you want to double or triple this recipe so that you can put away your meatballs for another time. Now, one other step I like to do, is I know I'm juggling a lot of things here, and thanks for following along, is what I did is I went ahead and I started to cook my meatballs in the skillet. What I like to do is I like to get a little brown on there, because you know brown equals flavor. So you can see that in there. I know you guys can get a close-up. So you can see that the rice, the meat, all the spices, everything that we incorporated are there and they're ready to go. So let's go ahead and take a look at how our broth is coming along. I'm sorry, our soup base, our caldo. We can call it a broth, that's okay. So we've got this lovely boil going on it here. Now the other vegetables that we're going to be adding, and I like to add those in towards the end, is we are going to be using some squash. And today I have a Mexican squash and I also have a yellow squash, and those colors are beautiful. Now squash cooks so quickly, we always want to add it in at the very end because I don't like the slimy texture. I don't know anybody who finds that appealing, but we want to add this in towards the end so they keep their shape and they are a little bit al dente. Now if you're not a squash fan, go ahead and skip it. If you're not an onion fan, you can skip that too. The wonderful thing about creating soups is you get to make them exactly like your tummy wants them or what your family enjoys. This is smelling lovely. I cannot believe. And you can see all of those vegetables getting incorporated there. And so at this time, I'm going to go, yes.
How important is it that you use that kind of pot?
Well, I like the Dutch oven because it is an enamel coated cast iron. It does hold heat, but any stock pan would be absolutely fine. In fact, when I'm making small batches, I'll sometimes just use different types of cookware, whatever's available. Remember guys, we got to make do with what's in our kitchen. And this is a delicious way to clean out your refrigerator too. And that's a great question, Manfred. I'm glad that you shared that with me. So let's go ahead and we're going to add in the rest of our beef stock. For those of you who want to keep it more of a different base, you can always add in vegetable broth, or if you like a chicken broth. But when I'm cooking with beef, I usually like to stay with the beef stock. That makes me feel good about what I'm creating there. Again, everybody has their own choice. So as this gets cranked up, I'm turning it up high, and I'm standing right here. You never want to turn anything high in your kitchen and walk away. So I like to use a nice little basket drop because this allows me just to drop those meatballs in. Now, if you're cooking at home and it's a Saturday afternoon and you have more time, you can get your broth to a nice hot boil and you can drop your meatballs directly in, put the cover on, let them cook at least 20 or 30 minutes. Make sure that your meatballs are fully cooked and then you can incorporate your vegetables at that time. So again, just to clarify, we're making a quick caldo today, so I'm putting everything in and getting it cooked as fast as I can. But if we were going to start to drop our meatballs in, we would let that cook first and then we would add in our carrots and our potatoes. That way we don't boil those out and then lose all of the texture and a lot of the vegetable in the soup. Now when you're dropping these in, another thing I just suggest, because I like to talk while I'm cooking and I'm a natural teacher, you never want to drop your meatballs in really high. There is nothing worse than being splashed with hot, hot broth. So you want to make sure that you're always safe in your kitchen. You're going to add these in, and again, look at that. That is looking beautiful already. I can't believe that. Well, I can believe it because I love this soup. Let's go ahead and move this out of the way, gang, and we're going to keep on rolling. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cover this, but we're going to add a little bit of spices in before I do. I'm using some Mexican oregano. I love the taste of Mexican oregano. Also, I have some caldo de tomate. That is a product that you can buy and find at the store. It's very similar to bouillon, but this is a tomato bouillon. I like it because it does add some spice in there. And then I eliminate using the salt, with the exception of the garlic salt. And if you like to use cumin, some people say cumin. Cumino is a very traditional blend that you'll find mixing in. And now that we've been talking, I wanted to tell you something. Please forgive me. One of the main things that you're going to incorporate into your meatballs is a little bit of mint. Now, mint is traditionally used when you're creating a Mexican meatball. And so what I did, and I'll make sure and I add it before I freeze those meatballs, because it was added to the meatballs I added here, is I take about 3 or 4 of these large leaves and I chop them up and I add them directly to my meat. It gives a freshness. If you don't have fresh mint going around, my granny has always been blessed to make sure that I always have yerba buena growing wherever I live. Making sure that I have plenty of fresh herbs is something that she taught me along the way. So sometimes you'll see them behind my counter. You'll see basil growing and dill and chives and whatever the heck is going on. But mint is really delicious to use in this. And if you don't have mint where you live, or if you're unable to buy it in the store, you can always use a flat leaf parsley. You don't want to use anything that's got a fancy leaf on that, because it does have a bitter taste when it's in the stew. So you can use that, or you can use cilantro. But the mint is the traditional way, and it gives that fresh brightness that is just so lovely in those meatballs. Well, let's go ahead and add those spices in now. And again, thank you for following along. One of the best things that I love is being able to look at your comments and your feedback and all the questions that you have. And this was a much requested soup, and so I'm glad that I was able to put that out today. Now, when making caldos in Southwest, or at least in southern New Mexico, we find a lot of times that we find little pieces of corn on the cob. These are wonderful little treasures. So you can feel free to add if you'd like. You can also add it frozen or from a can, or you can remove these from the cob if you'd like. And simple, I just drop those in. I like the flavor that comes from the cob once it cooks in there. It gives a nice little sweet background. I can't really describe it. It's not like a honey sweet, but it's a delicious corn sweet, and I know that you'll like it, so give it a chance. See what you think about that. Now, at this point, we can see that our vegetables are starting to soften. One way we can make sure is we can always see if they're of fork or tender quality. And at this time, since we've got everything together, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna add in those delicious squash. And that, my friends, is a Caldo de Albondigas. This is a lovely soup. You can make it year-round. I am one of those ladies that loves soup. I love caldos all year round. So this is a beautiful soup you can do. It is delicious in the winter time. Of course, it's lovely in all of the other seasons. But I encourage you to give it a try. And if you have any comments or want to know any more details about this delicious recipe, make sure you drop those in the comments. So what we're going to do is I'm going to cover this up. I'm going to get a bowl and I'm going to take a little taste sample because I want you to see how delicious it is, at least seeing it through my face when I'm sitting here smiling and having a grand time. Now this soup is also delicious for some people who like to make a red rice, and you can scoop this over. That is also very traditional. We find in our area the way that people cook soups and stews. Remember, cook with love, be kind. Our only job today is to get through it with a smile on our face. Make sure that we have delicious flavors. And again, thanks for following along. Let's see what we've got going on here. Now, one thing I also encourage too is that we do taste tests for spices. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add just a little bit of the broth to my bowl now, because I want to make sure before I feed it to my friends and family that it's exactly what I wanted it to be. Oh my gosh. Absolutely delicious. There's a Red Label soup can, and I'll tell you what, y'all don't have anything on me. I'm excited about it. I'm glad you guys are here.